from investing in other people's deals. I saw things that worked, didn't work. I saw the way that sponsors would treat me. Some of them I was like, oh, I love the way they're treating me and the communication. I'm going to do that. And then others, I was like, well, this is an example of what I don't want to do.
Move over, baby boomers. It's time for Gen XYZ. It's time to stop waiting on the world to change. It's time to be the change. It's time to stop thinking about how your life can be better. It's time to start taking action, massive action to improve your life. Join Zach Winter and Mark Adair Rios every week as we learn how others had the grit, determination, and conviction to 10x their lives, and as we explore ways that can help you 10x your life.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of the 10x for Gen XYZ podcast. I'm Zach Winter.
And I am Mark Adair Rios.
And we're very happy to have as our guest today, Matt Picheny. Matt is also a real estate investor and has a real estate investment firm. Matt, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Hey, Matt, how are you?
I'm awesome.
So, I just want to start off and just kind of let everybody know that, we have a little bit of similar backgrounds. You come from the entertainment industry and so do I. So it's going to be very interesting to just kind of chat with you and to see how your journey has unfolded for you. Matt also has a book out on Amazon right now. It's called The Backstage Guide to Real Estate. Produce passive income, write your own story, and direct your dollars towards positive change. So all of that is very performing arts oriented. I love that, especially that tagline. That's awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, man. So I guess we can just jump right in. I'd love to just hear, maybe start a little bit at the beginning. Like, how did you get into, a little bit before how you got into real estate? What were you doing before you were investing in real estate?
Have you ever been to Disney World?
Yeah.
So if you were in Disney World in 1984, you would have seen me singing and dancing in front of the castle at the Magic Kingdom. I was like 11 years old, and I performed in front of the Magic Kingdom. I was for like during the Christmas break, right? Yeah. And I mean, I loved doing that stuff. I had done it in sort of community theater and things like that. But that was my first paying performing arts job, right? And then as I grew up, middle school, high school, I was in the school play and I was in school musicals actually, and would do community theater and things like that. And I moved to New York in 1992 to pursue a career in theater. And I went to a musical theater conservatory and graduated from there. 3 days after graduation, I was off on tour doing a children's theater tour all over the country, and I ended up being a performing artist for 5 years. I was in 15 different productions across the United States. Did a lot of regional theater tours, things of that nature. Did a little off Broadway, and in the mid 90s, instead of waiting tables between acting gigs, I had started learning a little bit about computers and HTML. So instead of my job waiting tables at the Hard Rock Cafe in between acting gigs, I started doing HTML, and one thing led to another. Things were growing. It was the dot-com heydays. I was working out of my apartment. I got another desk in my apartment. And had two people working, and then I needed another desk in my apartment. I didn't have any more room, and so then I got a little office space.
So you were designing websites for people, like freelance?
Yeah, we were doing like website development, exactly. Awesome. And in setting up people's email. People didn't have email back then; like they were starting to get like, well, we need email, right? So we would help with that guy. Yeah, exactly. So we were starting with it. You help them buy a domain name, GoDaddy didn't exist back then. So anyway, we that was going great. And I had a little boutique agency for about 5 years. And then 2001 came, right? And the dot-com bubble burst. And I mean, that was a huge problem for me. A digital marketing agency, nobody's spending money on digital. A lot of my clients were going out of business, and my business was imploding. Wow. Okay. And as luck would have it, at that very time, my landlord tells me, hey, Matt, you got 90 days to find another apartment. You got to move out. So here I was in New York City wanting to stay in New York City, wanting to find a place to live with not very much from a financial perspective, like not having a job. How am I going to qualify for rent somewhere? I ended up Showtime, the cable television channel, was a client of mine, and they offered me a position to go in-house over there. So I did that. And I wanted to rent an apartment in a place, an area called the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And I was looking, and my sister was living up in Washington Heights, about 30 minutes further north. And she saw a sign on a bulletin board for an apartment for sale, a co-op apartment. I ended up buying that apartment, and a little over 2 years later, I sold it, and I more than quadrupled my initial investment.
Now,
Yeah.
Did you know anything about real estate when you first bought that? Like, how did you know what you were doing, or like, did the broker help you through it?
So my father did some residential real estate when I was younger. He then went on to have a career in the food service industry, but I wasn't a stranger to knowing that you can buy real estate. And obviously I consulted with my dad as I bought it. But for me, I knew that buying real estate was a good thing to do. Right. I knew that I would gain ownership. I would gain equity. I didn't know what equity was at the time, but I knew I would gain ownership in something, right? And I knew that eventually it would start to pay down my debt, and that it was a good way to build wealth, right? Those were like the things I knew, but that was about it. And so, looking back, I talk about it in the book. Like, looking back, I realized now what I did, which was, okay, first off, the real estate market was really, really kind to me back then, and things were going great in New York. But I bought in an area that was really up and coming. It was that they had just opened up a Starbucks around the corner and things like this. So the area was getting better. So I bought in a good area that was on its way up. That's one of the things that I did that was good, without really know. I mean, I knew that had I was like, oh, the Starbucks open. It looks like it's a decent area, but I didn't realize exactly what I was doing. I fixed up the unit itself. The unit itself had some cosmetic issues that I fixed, but more importantly, the building itself looked like it was from the 70s or early 80s. I mean, the hallways were like this weird pink color. The lobby was horrible. It was a really shabby looking building. Right. And when I moved in, actually, I ran into an actor friend that I had known from my acting. It was a friend of a friend's, but I knew him, this guy, and he was on the co-op board. And I would talk with him, and I was like, yeah, like they should do something about the hallways at some point. He's like, actually, we've been talking about that. We're putting together a committee. Would you want to be on the committee? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Why not? Right. So I was on that committee, and we hired an interior designer, and we redid the lobby, and we redid the hallways. And so the place looked like way nicer than when I had bought it, between the hallways and the lobby and the interior of the unit, and the neighborhood was getting great, and New York City real estate was doing great at the time. So there were all many, many different contributing factors. But honestly, like, there was things that I did, but I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I did a value add, right? Like you and I, Mark, I mean, I know you do these all the time, right? You do these value add deals. That's what I did. I did a value add. I just didn't know it was a thing, That's great. And so that's what, when I did that, and I quadrupled that initial investment, I was like, wow, how can I do that again? I had a good salary for someone, my age at that point in time. And in that one real estate transaction, I made more than I was making annually, salary wise. So that gave me the bug, right? I was like, how do I do that again? I need to invest in real estate. And so I ended up buying another place. Now I was able to actually afford to buy on the Upper West Side, which is where I had always wanted to live. And then I started looking for my first real estate deal. And about a year later, I bought a raw piece of land in Northwest Connecticut. And then eventually built a house on it. And I did real estate basically as a hobby for 10 years while I was climbing my way through the corporate ladder, if you can call it corporate. I mean, it was advertising agencies. So let's say semi corporate here in New York City. I just kept, working different jobs, getting promotions, or going to different agencies and climb that ladder. And always did real estate like on the side as a hobby. It was something that I enjoyed.
Great. And
that's a big bump up to go
yeah.
from, renovating your apartment to buying some raw land and doing ground up construction.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was.
Now, do you still have that house?
No, I sold it a couple of years ago. Honestly, like if I had known COVID was coming, I would have held on to it longer and then maybe sold it in the middle of COVID because it would have done really well. But one of the chapters in the book talks about it, where what happened is a friend of mine's father was a real estate agent in Northwest Connecticut, and he asked me if I would build a website for him. For his real estate business. And I said, sure. And he said, I want you to come see this area where we do a lot of business. And it was this beautiful lakefront community. And he was showing me all the different things. And I was like, wow, this is gorgeous. This is beautiful. And he happened to have a lot that was for sale, not on the lake. It was, a little ways away from the lake, but you still got like rights to the lake and everything. And I was like, how much does that cost? How much does a lot cost? And he told me, and like compared to New York City real estate, like it was just this raw lot, like it was really inexpensive. So I bought it as an investment. Like I was like, oh, maybe I'll sell it in a few years. And I'm a real estate genius now. I just quadrupled my money. Like really, I was like, I know what I'm doing, which I didn't, but and so I bought the land and then eventually decided to build on it. And then it became a short-term rental actually. And so I rented it out. It was always for rent all year round, but people would rent it for, a month or a week at a time. And that's when I learned, I learned from the ground up, like what real estate is made of, because like we cut down the trees, we dug a hole, we poured a foundation. Like I learned a ton from that. And then I learned about dealing with tenants and how to look at leases and things like that when I was dealing with tenants. And I learned that I don't want to be a property manager. And then I learned about the real fun stuff, which is the accounting, right? And depreciation and like all these other kinds of things that you need to know as an investor. So that property really set me on the path to where I am now. I ended up selling it a few years ago. I did okay with it. I didn't make a killing. I don't know if you factor in all the tax benefits I had over the years, I probably did extremely well. But also I learned so much from it. It was an amazing learning experience. And like, had I not done that, I never would have, I don't think I would be where I am now.
Right.
Interesting. What was your first commercial property that you got into?
So after I lived on the Upper West Side, we moved to Brooklyn. We bought a two-family, did what's known today as a house hack, right? Mm-hmm. But I didn't know there was such a term back then. The numbers seemed to make sense. And then about a year after being here, my wife got a really cool job opportunity down in Miami, Florida. It was really too good to pass up. So we moved to Florida, and that's when I decided that I wanted to do real estate full time. Mm-hmm. And I started looking and I started learning about, I did a few different things with some flips and things of that nature, but I found out about multifamily syndication, said I want to do that. Took me a really long time to find my first deal, but my first commercial real estate deal, to answer your question, was 132 unit deal in Lawrence, Kansas. So Lawrence is between Kansas City and Topeka, which is the capital of Kansas. And that was roughly $10 million deal.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it was quite a leap to go from, a townhouse in Brooklyn ain't cheap, right? But still, this was a huge leap to go to buying a $10 million piece of property. But, it wasn't just me. I could never have afforded to do that on my own. Yeah. But I learned about syndication. I'm sure a lot of your listeners know about syndication, but in case there's any new listeners, syndication is where a bunch of investors can pool their resources together. And that means, capital, for equity in the deal, like to put down the down payment on a deal. But it also means you can collectively leverage each other's experience and balance sheets so that you qualify for loans and things of that nature. And so once I learned about syndication, that was a huge eye-opening thing for me. And I started off, I always wanted to syndicate a deal. At that point, I had been doing real estate as a hobby for 10 years. I thought I would be very good at it, but I also wanted to passively invest. I had saved up a number of dollars while climbing that corporate ladder and wanted to deploy that in something other than just Wall Street investments. And so I started deploying into passive investment deals. I invested in 5 different passive investments during it took me 2 years to get my first deal as a sponsor. And so while that was happening, I was deploying into different deals. And I learned a lot actually from that experience, from investing in other people's deals. I saw things that worked, didn't work. I saw the way that sponsors would treat me. Some of them, I was like, oh, I love the way they're treating me and the communication. I'm going to do that. And then others, I was like, well, this is an example of what I don't want to do.
Interesting.
So, I learned a lot from sort of both angles.
Yeah.
Were they all multifamily investments that you passively invested in? Interesting.
They were at that time. I've now do some other types of investments. And I also do something that's kind of unique. I'm just going to bring it up because I think Mark might get a kick out of it, but although I think Mark might know this, but I invest in Broadway shows. So that's something that I do alongside my wife. That's her full-time career. And we've actually co-produced a couple of shows on Broadway, and we actually have 2 Tony Awards from our work. Which is
I
cool.
saw that. I was going to mention that. And so now as a producer, are you syndicating money for your Broadway shows, or are you just passively investing in other Broadway shows?
So here's the thing. I went to an event called The Secrets of Successful Syndication, where they talk about syndication from like a 30,000 foot level view. This was the first like syndication seminar thing that I went to. And I walked in there and I walked out of there going, I already know how to syndicate. This is just like a Broadway show. I just didn't know it was called syndication. It's like most Broadway shows are done as a 506c. I even knew the term 506c. I just never had heard the syndication. I was like, oh, it's just like the Broadway stuff, just for real estate. This makes sense. Now, look, I had a lot to learn. I was not an expert by any means, but I had invested passively in a number of Broadway shows. Cool. And then we got to a point now where we actually co-produce. So we do some GP stuff. I mean, my wife is intimately involved in a lot of these shows.
That's
and
great.
So we will part of that involvement will include raising capital.
I've always wondered about that. Are you able to find a correlation with your real estate investments and the risk that's involved with the Broadway shows? Because just over here on the film side, in my mind, that's what you do when you're raising capital for an independent movie, and it's the same thing. But the one thing, even as I learned how to do real estate and raising capital for real estate and all that, the one thing that I could never really come to terms with is how to describe, in the same way that we do with real estate investors, how do I describe and I guess mitigate the risks of investing in a film project? Because pretty much they tell you, hey, tell your investors you're going to lose all your money, because that's really what's going to happen. I can't do that. It's like that doesn't make sense on the real estate side, right?
When I do the real estate stuff, right, and that's kind of the bread and butter, right, and those are base hits, right, and those are a lot of times we do a 506b. So we can have people who aren't accredited, but they're sophisticated, right? In those deals. The Broadway stuff, 506c. Okay, you have to be accredited, and part of the reason is the risk involved. You're really going for a grand slam, right? And if you try to swing for the fences, a lot of times you strike out. And Broadway, there's a statistic that says that 80% of Broadway shows do not recoup their initial investment, right? So if you're going to invest in a Broadway show, you got to love it. You got to be into Broadway. You got to be, or you're really into the message behind the show.
Right.
Sometimes you're lucky. We invested in a show called Hamilton. You may have heard of it, right? I mean, It's a very popular show, and that has done incredibly well in terms of returns, right? So
are you still in it?
Higher, yeah. It's higher risk and a lot higher reward, right? Sure. So while it's almost, people say it's almost like angel investing or venture capital. Like if you hit one and you hit big, like look at the roulette table. If you put a chip down on, 17 or whatever, if it hits 17, you get paid out like 32-1 or something like that. But what are the odds that it's actually going to do that are pretty slim, right? So that's kind of what it's like. But listen, I was in Vegas not that long ago. I played some games a little bit. You know what? I knew I was like, I'm going to lose my money. But it was the entertainment. It was something I wanted to do. It was fun. It was entertaining. I enjoyed myself while I was doing it. And lose like, a couple $100 maybe, like not a lot of money, but I enjoyed it. And so that's the thing. If you have the money and you can do it and you like it, you can invest in these shows. And if you get into a show like Hamilton, and those only happen once every 10, 20, 30 years. I mean, they're not happening that often. Sure. It wipes out any losses you ever had.
That's crazy.
I mean, the returns can be really, really.
So do the returns last like beyond Broadway, all the off-Broadway stuff, all the residual stuff?
Yeah, in most cases they do. In most cases, you get the right of first refusal to invest in subsequent productions too. So like for Hamilton, I think we were like in 8 different companies of Hamilton between like the US and Australia and the UK and all the tours going on and things like that. So there are benefits to it that can outlive just that initial Broadway run, depending on a number of different factors.
That's fascinating. So you can basically roll your proceeds, almost like a 1031, into the Los Angeles production or the London production of.
Well, it's not Hamilton. Like a 1031 because you got to pay taxes, but yeah, you could. I mean, when we talk about Hamilton, again, it's kind of like a hard one to talk about only because it's kind of like a once in a lifetime thing. Yeah. But in that one, we had enough profits from Broadway that when they opened it up in Chicago, we didn't put any additional money. Like we just took like some of the money that was coming from Broadway. Yeah. We hadn't fully recouped from Broadway, but the money was coming in from Broadway, and we had enough had come in from Broadway to go ahead and put that into the Chicago production.
That's fantastic.
And then we had Chicago and New York going. So then when the next one, I don't remember if it was London, whatever, we had enough. And then, it just kind of went from there. So we never really took any additional money out of our pocket except for the initial. But again, that's an anomaly. You know what I mean?
Of course.
But it was great. And it's such a good show. I love that show.
Yeah. You brought up a really good thing that's very interesting, which is the, just from our perspective on the capital raising side and being able to put yourself into the shoes of the investors and not deciding for them the reasons why they might decide to invest. And for me, it just brought something up very important because I always had a roadblock, like I mentioned, with the film side of things, and because I'd been in the business for so long, it was just like my job, right? Like there's nothing special to me about being on a film set or, it's just like all these years kind of, but the thing to realize, at least from that perspective, is a lot of people don't have that experience. And it can be an interesting experience. And there are people that would invest just to be around that atmosphere for one time in their life. And it's very interesting to me, because you have to check yourself sometimes, when you're doing this stuff, and just make sure that you're staying open to possibilities and to, hearing how people want to approach it themselves, because it can open opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely like if you like the arts, what a great thing. Because look, there's 2 things. Number one, the show loses money. It's a tax write-off, right? I mean, it was an expense that you did, an investment you lost, but it's almost like you made a donation to the arts.
Right.
I mean, like seriously.
Right.
Or if it does well and you get a profit, then, and a lot of times you get to go to opening night. You get access to house seats. I mean, there's some nice kind of perks. It's not you're not going to be hanging out with the cast or anything like that, unless you know them like independently, but you invest in a show. It doesn't mean you're like hanging out with Bette Midler or something, but it's a cool thing and people like it. And especially if it's something that you like, you're passionate about, or, maybe you're not, but your spouse is, it can be a cool thing.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And you do a 506c because the risk is so high. You only want to.
Yeah, I mean, they're generally set up as a 506c, but like, look, I am very particular about the kind of things that I get involved in. The tagline for my book is produce passive income, write your own story, and direct your dollars towards positive change. Mm-hmm. And I don't take that last part lightly. Like I'm very much about being like conscious about what I'm doing with my investment dollars. And so that means when I'm investing in real estate, I'm investing in communities that are win-win situations where we're improving life for residents. I mean, it's not a charity. I'm not curing cancer. I'm there to make a profit. But I think the bottom line can be about more than just dollars and cents. Yeah. And I think that you can do well by doing good and be an ethical business person. And part of that is being ethical with my investors. And so if I have an investor who wants to take on something that is higher risk, like a Broadway show, which is like really risky, I'm going to be on the phone with them and tell them like, look, this is not going to be the next Hamilton. And like, are you accredited? Like this 50K, this 100K, whatever it is, like, if it's gone tomorrow, if I call you tomorrow and say, oh, guess what? The show opened, we got bad reviews and it closed in one day. Like, are you going to be upset? Because if you are, don't invest in this deal because that's a real potential situation. I don't say that to my real estate investors. Like, hey, the day after we acquire a property, we could lose the whole thing. Yeah. There's still the risk of a total loss in real estate. And I tell people that there's still the risk of total loss, but that'll happen more gradually than just overnight, usually in most cases, right? So I want to make sure that my investors, this is why anyone who wants to invest in my deals, I have this like club that I call it. It doesn't cost any money or anything, but it's just a way for me to get on usually a Zoom call. I prefer a Zoom call. I like to be face-to-face with people and talk with them and understand who they are, what their investment goals are, what their risk tolerance is, so that we can make sure it's a good match. I don't want anyone investing where it's not going to be good and then they're going to be upset down the road.
Yeah, that makes sense. For real estate, when we put syndications together, and I'm sure you do this too, we'll put together a property package and it will have projected returns each year, your cash on cash returns when we sell the property, your overall internal rate of return. How is there any of that kind of projections when you're dealing with Broadway shows?
There's a little bit. There's a thing called a recoupment chart, which shows projected like how many seats are in the theater, what the average ticket price is going to be, and how long it has to run, and that's assuming that tickets aren't discounted and things like that. So there is some math around it in some way to sort of quantify it, but what they can't quantify, the recoupment chart is like, here's how many tickets we need to sell at certain prices, whatever, to get to the break-even point.
Right.
And that's it. And they don't say, oh, we think it's going to have 10% cash on cash, or we think it's going to be that. No, that doesn't exist.
Because you just don't know how long it's going to run.
That could be a work of, look, you don't know how it's going to be received. You got Wicked as an example. So Wicked's been running forever, right? Good show. Like the investors in that, I think, are thrilled. Like they've done very well over the years, but like it did not get good reviews. And it didn't win the Tony for Best Musical. You know what I mean? But usually it's like, oh, you need good reviews and you get the Tony for Best Musical. And then, you sail off into the sunset, right? I mean, I don't know. Like that usually that's a formula for success, not always. But then there are shows, I don't have an example, but I'm sure there's shows that have gotten good reviews and won the Tony and didn't recoup. And then you have Wicked, which didn't and is doing really well. So what are audiences like? What do people buy tickets for? Who knows? We do our best to try to figure that out. But again, listen, this is something I feel like we're dwelling on it a lot because it's cool and it's unique, but it's something that my wife and I do together in partnership once in a while. Yeah. Like my main job is real estate. Like 99% of what I do is real estate. she does theater all the time because that's her full-time gig on the business side. She works for a large company that does that. This is just kind of like something that we do. We take it seriously, but it's something that we do on the side. And sometimes we'll go 3 years without doing. Between Hamilton and Moulin Rouge, it was 3 years we didn't do anything. So we pick and choose very carefully.
Right.
Yeah. Well, let's shift back over to the real estate. So you did your first one in Lawrence, Kansas, and do you still have that one, or did you exit?
We exited that one. Yeah, we sold that one about a little over 2 years after we purchased it. We sold it. We were getting ready to sell it right before COVID. Then COVID came, so we paused and waited for a moment, and then we said, "Yeah, you know what? We'll go ahead and sell." Eliminate the risk of COVID because we didn't know where COVID was going. If there would be a vaccine, or what would happen.
Right.
So we went ahead and exited it. We did very well, beat our projections, and we're happy with that one.
Great.
Yeah, that's terrific. I think everybody that was in real estate when COVID hit, it was the great unknown. I know Mark and I took a big pause on our investment properties, and we're really wondering what's going to happen. How many of our residential, how many of our commercial tenants are going to have problems paying. And then it ended up being a big boom, right? And cap rates continued to decompress, and real estate prices really started to decline quite aggressively. So.
Yeah, it's interesting to see all of that kind of unfold and see how this let's call it an event, but this period really it just kind of brought out some of the different kind of asset classes and showed how it can vary. Depend, like there's no broad base, hey, we're having a recession and everything's just going to go down, right? There's types of events that can happen that can affect different types different ways. It's very interesting as we kind of looked at it to see how that played out.
Yeah, I mean, across, I think everything I'm invested in. So 2/3, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, 2/3 of my portfolio I'm a limited partner in, and the other third are deals that I'm a GP on. And across all of those, I think we saw across COVID a decrease in the actual profitability of the properties. Not huge, but took a little hit. We had some problems with collections and things of that nature. And then there was rental assistance, which helped out. But overall, I think NOI, didn't do great. But valuations went really unbelievably high because those cap rates got really compressed. And it's just kind of interesting that something like that would happen, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's something that would have been very, very hard to predict and game out, right? Like, these stay-at-home orders. Well, that's going to mean industrial is going to go through the roof. And social distancing, that's going to mean people are going to want to move out into the suburbs, and suburban, multifamily is going to do very, very well.
Right. Yeah. Like in Kansas City, right? We have our property in the Northland that's outside of the city. You could call it suburbs. You had two properties out there kind of in the same general area as well.
Yeah.
And, they actually did very, very well as people kind of, took flight from the CBDs and tried to get out into the suburbs, So in your portfolio, are you invested in anything other than multifamily, or do you have any commercial stuff, any self-storage?
Broadway.
Yeah.
No, I don't really have any self-storage. I don't have any mobile homes. I've looked into those things. I've never seen anything that has really made me say, oh, this is going to be so much better than multi. And I know multi really well. Like I know how to underwrite it. I know how to look at it. I know the operators such that I'm like, it's a little bit more of a sure bet. If I come across an investor who's like, these guys who are doing self-storage, I just invested, in these deals and they're knocking it out of the park, then I would look at it. But I just haven't come across that yet. I have gotten involved in a few different ground up development projects and land entitlement projects, which has been very interesting and a great learning experience for me. It's something I'm interested in doing.
Right.
Having built the house, then I'm like, all right, so now I'm going to build like 200 houses, right? So but there's, obviously when you're at a different scale, it's a bit different. So I've been investing passively in those deals to sort of see how it goes and learn from a little bit of a distance. But I think that's something I know that's something I'm very interested in, and maybe it's something I'll end up getting involved in a project in the next year or two that'll be a ground up development, because I think I'm very interested in doing that.
And on the land entitlement project, is it they're buying raw, the project is you're buying raw land and you're having it entitled for multifamily, and then you're going to flip it before there's construction?
Yeah. So, well, there's been a number of different projects that I've been involved in, and some of them do involve land that is prior to it being entitled. So we get a large lift on the land value once the entitlements are in place. In one particular case, we were planning to go vertical, but then COVID came right at that same time, and it actually made more sense to go ahead and exit that deal. So we exited that deal, sold it off to a developer.
Did you go horizontal and put in infrastructure before you exited?
No, once we were complete with the entitlements, we then sold it.
Yeah.
Because
Which has well, I was just going to say, just doing that that amount of work actually helps raise the value just from a raw land, status.
We did really well on this deal. Yeah. We did really well on that deal. Better than some multifamily deals that have been involved. Like, we did really well on that. Yeah. It would have been better. It was in an opportunity zone. It would have been better if we could have gone vertical, held on to it for, the 10 years. And because it was in an opportunity zone, we would have the tax benefits. So, the problem is we got done with the entitlements right as COVID was starting.
Right. Right.
So everybody's construction projects were put on hold.
Right.
And because we were going to JV with someone, and then whatever. It's a bit of a complicated story, but the bottom line is we did very well, and so I'm happy with it. But coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Now let's talk a little bit about your passive investing. So with your passive investing, do you only work with a select few of sponsors, or are you out in the market always looking for and when I mean sponsors, operators, or are these people that pretty well and you're a repeat investor, or how does it work for you?
In most cases, at this point, I have people that I've invested with in the past that I've enjoyed investing with them. Maybe they had great returns, but more so also I like them as people. I think they're good sponsors and communicative and things of that nature. So that's really important to me. And so I tend to invest with those people, especially if they have a deal that goes full cycle, that I just kind of roll that money in the next one many times. But I'm always looking for new things. I was just at a conference recently with some guy, and I really liked him a lot. And I know some people that have invested with him, and they say he's really great. So guess what? I just got on his mailing list, and if he has something that comes around at the right time, I'll probably go ahead and invest in it. But those referrals are key at this point. I don't like randomly meet people and then get invest with them. Like, there needs to be a little bit more there, just because I used to, because I didn't know anybody. Right. And so that's how you get to know people. But then once you get to know people, it's kind of like, I know the people that I like, and
that's great.
Yeah, that makes sense. What types of communications do you like receiving from your sponsors?
I'd like them to all send out the report that I send to my investors, but unfortunately it doesn't work out that way. But
what are you sending to your investors?
I send out an email to my investors once a month, usually towards the end of the month, and it'll be a report on the prior month. So like at the end of February, we'll send out the report from January.
Yeah.
And, so the way that I like it is I want the like top level information in the body of the email. I don't want to open up an attachment. I don't want to go to Dropbox and download something. Like, I want it in the friggin' email. And a lot of people won't. It'll be like an attachment. There's like a PDF attached. I really don't like that. So what I do is I have a couple of paragraphs at the top. Hey, here's what's going on. Maybe an update on distributions or an update on K1s this time of year, right? And say, hey, here's what's going on with these couple things. Here's the high level numbers. And in the body of the email, I have total income, expenses, and NOI. And I show actual and projected.
Mhm.
And then I have a chart that shows the past 12 months of projected and actuals of those metrics on a chart. Okay. So you can see how it's trending. And then underneath it there, it says, if you want the full monthly report, click here.
Mhm.
If you click there, it takes you to a report that's got the T12, the balance sheet, the budget for actually the whole 9 yards, rent roll, right? Bank statements, everything is in there. But I have email software that I use to send it out, right?
Yeah.
And I can see who clicks on that. Nobody clicks on that link.
Yeah.
Right.
Why? Because all the information they need is there. And I don't, fortunately, I don't have any deals that are like, in a position where people are like, let me scrutinize what's going on here, and wanting to look at that detail. Once in a while, I'll see a click on it, but in most cases, they see what's going on. They see the income. They see the expenses. They see the NOI.
Yeah.
They see they're getting a distribution. They're like, great, I'm happy.
Right.
Right. And they really appreciate the communication. I think monthly is a nice periodic update to provide your investors with.
I'll tell you this, Zach. I'm when I have properties for like 2 years or longer, I switch to quarterly.
Mm.
Because once we're that far in, first off, a lot of the deals that I'm doing are like value add. And so there's a lot of information to communicate. Once we're 2 years in, there's barely anything new to communicate. And if the deal's performing well, it's just kind of like, yay, we did good again,
Exactly.
and there's not that much to say. And so once you're 2 years in, if you're getting those cash on cash distributions like you thought, I think going to a quarterly is fine, quite honestly.
Yeah, we have a couple of industrial flex office parks, and they're triple net leases. So initially we were doing quarterly webinars, but we had a similar experience that you had in terms of people not opening the documents for our webinars. Initially, there were maybe half of the investors would show up. And then it just started dwindling down to the point where we had maybe 6 people showing up for these quarterly webinars. So we switched it over to quarterly email reports, and that's fine. But on our value add multifamilies, they're monthly updates because there's a lot more activity and a lot more stuff going on, and more frequent updates. So similar approaches.
And so do you buy into any of like the bells and whistles of the software platforms and logging into that and using that as a tool? Just on the you have a tech background, so I'm sure that you might like all that stuff, right?
Well, I do have an investor portal that we use to whenever we do a distribution, we put it in there so an investor can go back and kind of look and see where things stand. And we put the K1s on there, and people can sign the documents electronically when they're investing in the deal. But I don't put the reports on there. And maybe I should, but that would require me then, I guess, taking the email and turning it into a PDF and then uploading it to the portal. I have all of the emails saved in my inbox, number one, but number two, in the email software where if someone wanted a previous report, and I save all the reports I get from all my investments as an investor. I have folders, and when I read the monthly report, and then I just put it in the folder. So I could always go back and see, hey, what was property X doing in November of 2019? I just go in, find it right away. I don't see a need to put it in the portal, so I don't. I've never had anybody say anything to me about it not being in the portal because they're getting it to their inbox.
Yeah,
if they want
totally.
to save it, they can, or I'm happy to resend it if someone needs it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. There's some people that really are attached to the portals and kind of get down with, wow, yeah, that's a really, that portal's not so great. And I'm talking limited partners, right? Investors. And then we have a few investors that they'd much rather just send us an email or jump on the phone and talk to us.
Yeah.
Send me a hard copy of my K1s. I don't want to log into no portal. It's crazy.
I have a guy. He's awesome. I love him. He's an older gentleman, and he's very supportive of me. I love the guy, but he's like, I don't do portals. Like, okay. He just doesn't do them. That's his thing. And I'm like, okay, got it.
Yeah.
Everybody else loves it.
Nice.
Interesting. And so have you kind of plotted out your next few years? Are you going to kind of try to exponentially add how many units do you have kind of combined right now? I think it's 4,000.
A little over 2,300 as a general partner, a little over 6,000 as a LP. So 8,000. Look, I don't have any particular goals when it comes to specific unit counts.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, look, if we sell properties, then the unit count goes down, you know what I mean? And having exits can be a good thing. So it's really about just trying to find nice opportunities for other people to get involved with. I mean, I'm comfortable from a financial perspective. I don't need to do a deal a year, 10 deals a year, whatever it is.
Right.
And just looking to really find some nice investments that can produce passive income for people. And that may mean 4 deals this year. It may mean no more. I'll at least have one because we have one that we're about to close on Monday. But after that, I don't know. I'm continuing to look. I'm not like sitting around doing nothing, but the right things need to come, and the market's really hot right now. Things are pretty frothy. And so we're just taking a conservative approach, but we're finding deals. So we'll continue at it.
Nice. Very nice. Excellent. Well, this has been great, man. I really, really appreciate you jumping on and kind of talking through. There's a lot of fun stories, and that you have, and just fascinating, this whole idea of kind of doing what we do over in the theater world, and getting down with that. So thank you for coming on and chatting with us this afternoon.
If
people pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Thank you. How can people find out more about you and your investment company?
Yeah, I go to my website. It's picheny.com. I'll spell it real quick. It's P like in Peter, ICHENY.com. I'm sure you'll probably put a link to it in your show notes, but here's my book. I got my book. My book is available there. I have a blog that has really good real estate information. I have a monthly newsletter where I send out investment tips. So it's a good resource to learn more and get really educated or further your education in real estate. So check it out.
Fantastic. Yeah. And the book is called Backstage Guide to Real Estate. Produce passive income, write your own story, and direct your dollars towards positive change. I love it. So yeah, thanks a lot, Matt. Really
thank you,
talking
Matt.
with you, man.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, guys.
All right. 10X for Gen XYZ is hosted by Zach Winter and Markader Rios, co-founders of Prosperity CRE, a commercial real estate investment firm committed to providing its investors with ongoing cash flow and building long-term wealth. If you like the podcast, please give us a positive rating and subscribe to be notified about future content. Also, if you'd like to learn more about our approach to real estate investing, you can download a free copy of our real estate investment book, Investing for Cash Flow and Long-Term Wealth, by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thank you, and stay tuned for our upcoming episodes.